Hello and welcome back to Let the Stone Speak. I'm Brent Nagtegaal, the host of the program. Earlier today, we visited Tel Shiloh, where we interviewed Dr. Scott Stripling. He is the provost at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas. He's also the director of the renewed Tel Shiloh excavations, excavating ancient Shiloh, this place where the tabernacle was located for a number of centuries. Dr. Stripling is conducting the excavations here with a massive team on behalf of the Associates for Biblical Research. He's been excavating here for a number of seasons. We've had previous interviews with him during those seasons in past years, but now the excavation is actually getting to an extremely interesting point in terms of uncovering the history of the Israelites while this was the capital city for the nations during the period of the Judges and a little bit earlier. So what we're going to do today is go to the interview I did with Dr. Stripling. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is. Hi, Dr. Stripling. Thanks very much for coming on the show again.
Hey, Brent. Glad to be with you, and welcome to Tel Shiloh.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've talked to you every season for the past 3 seasons, and each year your team, it looks like it expands. How many people do you have here with you this time?
We have 222 registered volunteers this summer throughout the excavation. So on site today, there's about 90. Last week, there were about 100 per day. So there's some coming and going, but altogether, 222 people.
And in terms of archaeology in Israel, that's a huge team.
Yeah.
That's probably like the biggest team, I imagine.
Probably. It enables us to do some of the things that we're doing that are a bit slower, like wet sifting, for example,
Right.
and some of the protocols that we're following. When you've got a larger team, it helps.
So in terms of the periods that you're excavating right now, it's a big tell. What periods are you excavating, and what is your period of focus, perhaps?
We have 9 levels of occupation, starting with early Islamic on the top, and then we've got MB2 on the bottom. So altogether 9 levels, and after 5 seasons of excavation now, we've got a really good handle on the stratigraphy, and our cross sections are really nice, assigning each locus to a stratum so that we know what's going on. The focus, if you will, is the late bronze Iron 1 transition. And but of course I find it all interesting.
Right.
Right. We're going through a lot of interesting Byzantine stuff, a lot of interesting Second Temple period stuff. But our intense focus, you might say, is on Iron 1 LB transition.
And in terms of a date that you could put to that, give or take, so people can understand.
Yeah, so it's my view that the conquest, if you will, Joshua's conquest, or the Israelite emergence into the land, is around 1400 BC, and that's where our pottery indicates that same thing as well. So we've got a shift that is happening even in the faunal assemblage at that time. Diet is changing. So maybe 1400 to 1100 or 1075 thereabouts might be that tabernacle period at Shiloh. And we started with a hypothesis, and we've tested that with the various metrics along the way. Seems to be pretty consistent.
And that's your hypothesis, that this is the dating span that you would have for this transition from late Bronze Age into Iron?
Yes.
And at the end. So how have your excavations so far impacted your understanding of the period in which the tabernacle was here?
Well, the period-wise, I don't think it has, other than that we've been able to calibrate the terminal date. So we have a destruction layer, a plastered floor with a destruction layer underneath it, Iron 2A pottery above it, Iron 1 pottery beneath it. We carbon dated that to about 1075 BC, and that's what the pottery was telling us too. That seems like the Philistine destruction of Shiloh. That's suggested in the biblical text.
Right, but not literally there.
Not literally there. So I think we are more clear on the terminal date. Around 1400 is what I would say. Seems like archaeologically that's also what we get. The difficulty, of course, is that they're still semi-nomadic at that time.
Right.
And so people living in tents don't leave a big imprint except in the pottery. So, we do have the pottery. The structures we don't see until that transition from LB2 into Iron 1.
Okay, which is a bit later. So what you're saying, if I can distill it, is that you see a different people coming in based on the pottery. Their pottery is slightly different from the
faunal.
And the faunal. So what they're eating is different to those that were before them. However, they're using the structures that were already here for a time, as well as tents around about, and then eventually they start building their own.
They remember what the biblical text says. You're going to live in houses you didn't build. You're going to occupy cities you did not construct. And so that's consistent with what we see here. But also, Brent, think about kind of that biblical idea of how can I build myself a house when God still lives in a tent?
Right.
And so concomitant with the monumental building that we've uncovered that appears to be a strong candidate for the tabernacle, then we begin to see domestic structures emerge. So there's a house for God that is built, and now they begin to build themselves domestic structures.
So you just put David back what David said back a few hundred years there.
Well, but
thought.
It goes to show you that thought, you know, is an ancient idea.
So as far as this period where you have this building, maybe you can describe this building so people can understand. What have you found outside of the structure itself that points to its religious function as well?
Yeah, we have just behind us a monumental building from the Iron Age 1 period. Just yesterday we came down on the floor finally, and so of course our thoughts are always in flux about this, but it matches the dimensions in the Bible for the tabernacle, and it's divided on ratios of 2 to 1, sort of holy space and most holy space. The walls are preserved to a height of 2.1 meters, and so they're significant walls, 1.2 meters wide, 2.1 meters high. And the pottery and then the finds around this are very interesting. So, for example, we have 3 horns from a 4-horned altar inside and outside of this building, sort of demolished in this area. One of them in secondary usage.
So their context is after the destruction because they were found destroyed.
That's right. The ceramic pomegranates that we're finding also with the little hooks on them, a motif of the tabernacle also, and 2 of those around this building as well. We have the storage rooms that line the inside of the wall right next to this building, nowhere else on the site, but only here. Seems that it corresponds. And then the gate
to what part would the store? Why would we expect to see?
Well, I mean tithes. People are bringing tithes in biblical times. They can't go to tabernacle.org and make a secure online donation.
Right.
You know, they're going to have to bring commodity, and so it's creating that verisimilitude or that consistency that we would want. Nowhere else on the site do they have that. So it's giving us a really interesting look at what life was like in the tabernacle period at Shiloh. But maybe most interesting is the faunal assemblage. So we have a massive favisa bone deposit here on the east. If you walk due east of this building, which is perfectly east-west, by the way, if you walk due east of that, you will run into this massive bone deposit. And we have tens of thousands of bones from clean animals, kosher animals, 0% pig bone, and pottery from the late Bronze Age period, that LB1B, LB2A transition, and on down into LB2B. The vessels are restorable. And like for us at Shiloh, once a week maybe we get a vessel that's restorable, but there almost all of them are restorable, as if they're part of a sacrificial process.
Yeah, so what type of vessel? Is there a greater percentage of a certain typology than others over there?
Yeah, we're still, it's preliminary, so we're still in the process of analyzing that, but a lot of painted ware, a lot of Cypriot imported ware, imitations of that, gold objects, ceramic objects with stars on them, a lot of things that are cultic in nature. You know, many archaeologists work their whole career and don't uncover gold.
Right, it's quite rare.
And we at least once a week, we're getting gold objects out of that area too. Seems like that's part of the sacrificial process as well.
And you were talking about this earlier, but the bone deposits you've gone through, you know, you knew that this was already part of the sacrificial system before you even came to the site, really, studying previous excavators and what they found. And then you kind of use that information to start digging the same area. Is what you're finding as far as the bone deposits consistent with the earlier data from Israel Finkelstein that excavated here?
It is, with a couple of nuances. Professor Finkelstein saw this favisa as being LB1 only, and he thought that the Canaanites that were at this site had built a sacrificial temple, if you will, were running a sacrificial system from the summit of the site. That when the Israelites arrived, in his view back then, he thought maybe around 1200 or something like this, you finally have Israelites arrived, that they cleaned off the remnants of the Canaanite sacrificial system. I guess supposedly the Canaanites had piles of bones lying around their temple, and then dumped all of them over here at one time, and that the tabernacle was on the summit of the site.
Right.
I, however, seeing an earlier emergence of Israel in the land, believe that they directly deposit the bones here, and that this is evidence of the Israelite sacrificial system. So not LB1A, but at the very end of LB1A and on into LB2. I've reanalyzed the pottery. I've brought in top ceramicists who agree with me that it's an LB1B, LB2A assemblage, for example, matching the assemblage at Beth Shean Stratum 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the bones, back to the bones, what you found there, how did you know? Because he said it was a Canaanite deposit, and you came and said, well, no, it's an Israelite deposit because the dating matches an early entrance to the Promised Land as you would see it. But there was also the makeup of the bones that indicated that it was Israel.
Right. He noted in his final report that there was a disproportionate percentage of right to left. So more right-sided bones than left-sided bones. He did not give any interpretation to that, but he did note it. Of course, we have the biblical text in Leviticus 7 that says that the right side of the animal is the priest's portion. Now, I brought a zooarch onto our team this season, Haskell Greenfeld, a very seasoned zooarchaeologist, to then dive deep into this analysis so that with our technology being better, of course, now than it was in the 1980s, we will analyze each bone, we'll extract collagen. We've been able to identify microstratigraphy within that deposit as well.
Okay, yeah.
And so we'll do a deep dive, and then we'll publish that material, and that'll be, of course, part of our larger understanding of what was happening at that time.
So let's go to this season now. We're sitting in a really amazing location. Perhaps you can tell us what excites you most about what you're finding so far 3 weeks into excavation.
If you would have asked me at the beginning of the excavation, what would sort of your dream be? What would you hope to find? I would have said, well, the gate and then evidence of the tabernacle.
Right.
And when I came here in 2016 and walked up this path to drive the first stake in the ground for the excavation, Lane Rittmeyer was with me, Susan Latimer was with me, and I walked through what we now believe is the gate of the city, not knowing that it was the gate, it was underground, and walked up to the middle of the slope where we now have this monumental building, and I drove that first stake. And now, lo and behold, we have evidence of that. So right next to us or right behind us, you see these columns that are emerging, these pillars, 4 courses. That massive wall behind us is a retaining wall for the glacis. So you can see the glacis on the other side, and it stops here.
Right.
So, of course, this made me curious.
Right.
And as I explored, we then found an opening, a breach, a symmetrical breach in the wall here, which, of course, you would never do that intentionally. The purpose of the wall is to keep people out. And now we have found inner chambers in that area. So we're actually sitting right now in the outer gate, and then you can see the inner gate behind us. That's interesting because the Bible says that Eli died in the gate at Shiloh. If like me, you take Elamarna 288 as referring to Shiloh, that Turbasu was slain in the gate of Silu, if he was the Egyptian governor, for example, and you see this uprising by the Habiru, that he's slain in the gate here, then now that becomes interesting because we've got sort of an inner chamber where the leader might sit.
Right.
And then the Danish dig director, Hans Kier, back almost 100 years ago, was working in this area and became mortally ill and never recovered. So I tell people if they get on my bad side,
let's
we're
get out of
send you
here
over
right
to the
now.
gate area. So this area where we are is very, very interesting.
And this is just really just an amazing, even though you said when we're going to film here, just an amazing thought process to think about who was here in this location. Yeah. You mentioned Eli dying in the gate as well. And what function did the gates kind of have from the biblical period? Well,
security is number one. So justice, economics, worship, security, those 4 things. So people come to the gate to get justice. So an elder, the leader of the city, they're going to mete out justice. Of course, archives are often found in the gate area as well, so it's sort of a courthouse, if you will. And even worship, sometimes people outside of Jerusalem, here I don't think it would have been because they're the tabernacle.
Right.
But in a lot of sites, you'll find shrines in the gate.
I think was close to the gate.
Caiapha is a good example. And then, of course, security. So justice, worship, economics, and security are the 4 functions of gates in antiquity.
Which makes it, what archaeologists would like to find.
Exactly.
when they come here.
We had visitors from the Antiquities Authority 2 weeks ago, and they came out and they just kept saying, "You've got the gate. We can't believe it. This is the gate." And of course, I feel the same way. We're
Right.
we're very enthusiastic about this. We've come down probably 5 meters from where we started here to where we're sitting right now, and we're now into that context where I think we can have a lot of confidence in that identification.
So you've had a huge team here. This is your 5th season of excavation, massive international team. There was recently an article that came out in Haaretz that was just talking about how there can be a problem in Israel that you have so many excavations going on and this massive material that remains in a university somewhere unpublished to describe what they found there. There might be a concern you're digging here with so fast, with a huge team, that you're not keeping up with the publication. How is that process working out for you?
I think it's a valid point that's been raised. I completely agree. It's a big problem has always been a big problem. It's people want to keep digging without publishing. We've made it a priority to publish. Kerbet al-Makader, we finished 6 years ago, and we have the final volumes. I have volume 2
Very
right here
nice.
with me, hot off the press.
Great.
Published by Archaeo Press, 400 pages.
So you finished excavating in 2016, and 7 years later. That's, from my experience, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, and we would have actually hit the 5-year target, but COVID, I didn't
Right.
have access to a lot of the material to
Right.
finish it. So,
Right.
Publication, as you can see, is a priority for us. We already are doing peer-reviewed articles from our findings here, and so that's on the top of my priority list. So I agree with the point that was raised in Haaretz, but some sort of ban, or especially against foreign expeditions, let's not make it across the board,
Right.
because the same thing could be said of Israeli excavations.
Oh, yeah,
Those
and
who
that's
are,
what I was
those who
saying.
are publishing, let's continue to license them to do so, and those who aren't, let them meet their metrics before they move on. Yeah.
Right. So you've done 3 weeks, and you've got 2 weeks to go, is that right? And then your team's gone for,
That's right.
for a while.
Yep, we'll be digesting what we excavated, taking it through our protocols, researching, writing articles, doing all the things that we need to do to give us a big picture, a global view of what was happening here during those times. Working on the stratigraphy,
Right.
writing preliminary reports, and doing all that we need to do. I think we've got about 4 or 5 more seasons after this one to answer our original research questions.
Right.
And then my focus will be publication.
Great. And so I guess when you go back to the United States, you're from Texas, you work there. This is not your full-time job. You've got a whole another job that you do at the same time.
Right.
And then do you pop back to Israel to look at the discoveries throughout the year?
Usually I'll make 2 or 3 trips during the year to speak at a conference or to take care of business. Sometimes we'll do a winter project. For example, our bone analysis. Maybe we'll bring some students back in the winter along with our zoo arc, and we'll then sit down for a few weeks and complete the Area D ceramic and faunal analysis. So those types of things I might do during the year, but the main focus is in the summer. And yes, I do have a life and a job back in Texas. People often ask, like, why don't you dig all year long?
Yeah,
and
right.
We do have other responsibilities.
Well, I think what you're doing here is a really good job. I think it's a model of how you can bring a massive team together and still make it function coherently. It's very hard to do, to manage so many areas. You must have some good area supervisors under you,
do.
and then to get it to publications so fast. Do you feel like there's going to be a discovery maybe that comes out earlier?
Well, I mean, I haven't made official announcements
Right.
on the gate and on the monumental building. We are pretty confident of what they are, but I'd like to
take your
keep
time.
working at it. And when we do, we'll be confident that at least you can say that there's a plausibility or a likelihood, a strong likelihood that these are those things.
Right.
Unless we have a sign that says "Welcome to the Gate of Shiloh."
That'd be nice.
It would be very nice. One of the churches here, we have a
Right.
Shiloh inscription in it. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thanks for coming out today.
Cheers.
Yep.
Thanks very much for watching this episode of Let the Stone Speak with Dr. Stripling. Thank you to him for taking the time out of this very busy excavation to sit with us and talk with us about the importance of the site and what they're uncovering. I would like to mention our magazine. This is called Let the Stone Speak. This issue just came in the mail here in Jerusalem. It's about the mighty music of the biblical Hebrews. There's, of course, a number of other articles in there, particularly about our excavations that are about to begin in collaboration with Hebrew University and Professor Uzi Lievner. There's an article in there by Christopher Reams about what the Ophel is, the place that we're excavating here in Jerusalem, and as well as an interview with Professor Lievner talking about the different areas that we're going to open up and some of the research questions as well. So on top of learning about the music of the Hebrews, of the ancient Israelites, you've got a number of articles there about Jerusalem archaeology as well. So if you would like to receive your free subscription of this magazine, please go to our website, armstronginstitute.org, and scroll down and you'll find a place where you can request your free subscription, or you can write me an email sending that to letters@armstronginstitute.org, and simply put your name and address, and we'll make sure we sign you up for a free subscription to the magazine. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.